Welcome to the road back to 2500. This is when I try to hold myself accountable to a wider audience using the social pressures of the media sphere to get me into gear, get me ready to do some chess. And before I bloviate, I'm just going to introduce a couple positions we're going to talk about. Right here, I'm doing this book on calculation. I'm going to talk about it more. But right now, just to kind of have fun, something to look at while you have to listen to me, this is a position with black to move. In general, I just put a little black to move and an arrow of the white's last move. So it's black to move, and the arrow shows what white's last move is. I could get rid of the arrow. I don't know. Anyways, the last couple weeks have been kind of hard. As many of you might have noticed, I did not do last week or the week before. 2 weeks ago, we had the show where I analyzed people's games, and then last week it just totally fell out due to various reasons. But I am back. And one thing that's interesting about chess training that is discussed a lot and certainly has its place is the idea that calculation should be the center of your chess training. And it's topical. I feel like it comes up a lot when people are talking about how to improve. Maybe the most popular, at least in terms, if not in practice, but in theory, i.e. it's easier to have it in theory than it is to do it in practice. But I think it's mostly because of Dvoretsky and that school of thinking about chess, which tries to gain the competitive advantage through calculation, through analysis, if you will, which is a slightly different thing than calculation, but we can talk more about it in a second. Kill the arrow, please. I'll kill the arrow. Yeah. Again, I'll reintroduce. This is black to move. We're going to talk about it a little bit, but I thought it's a hard position, so to give you a chance to think about it. Anyways, I think Jacob Agard has taken this calculation thing to heart, and so I picked up his book, and this is calculation here, and I'm just doing these things every morning as part of my routine. And I want to just say, it's very enjoyable. I don't know how much it's helping me. It's mostly a bunch of mind teasers, and I just enjoy that in general. I enjoy doing chess puzzles. To what extent it helps me, that's another thing we can talk about, but I do enjoy it. Now, something I'm going to force myself to talk about is the fact, it's surprising to me. If you've been on the show before, you know that I've said it 1,000 times, it probably seems dull, but the hardest challenge of my life, and I've done several challenges. I've written a book, did a PhD in a foreign country, yada yada, did the GM title late. The hardest thing has been for me to get back into shape, specifically just even losing weight. It's been really hard, and all I can say is it is the hardest thing I've ever even tried. I have tried so many ways at this problem. Imagine, you're trying to improve in chess, and there's calculation, there's this, there's that. Well, there's like an nth amount degree more things you can do to try to lose weight, and most of them are probably wrong, and for me, none of them are working. So it's this like ongoing grief. But I do hope now that we're kind of beginning fall, temperature's not so hot here, I can go out running. Maybe the gym will reopen at some point. The kids back at school, daycare anyway, so I should have at least more time. But even before this, I was not successful in this journey. The last time I was successful was like 2013, and it's been a steady downslope from there. And obviously kids moving to a different place, yada yada, there's loads of excuses, but I'm just putting it out there. It's difficult, and I don't want to talk about it too much because it just enervates me. But one question about weight, of course, is like, well, how much are you supposed to weigh? And there's obviously disagreement about that. For me, I'm just like trying to get back to the top level of like healthy in BMI. So for me, as my size, that's like 189. And I've been consistently like 10 pounds over for this entire time. I know this isn't chess, but I have a feeling a lot of you out there are struggling with similar stuff. I was gonna say an expletive, but I'm sure some of you are struggling, and I know that it's part. I know that it's part of this journey to get stronger at chess, and definitely when I played my best chess, it was at a time when I think it wasn't just being physically fit, though that was probably the most important thing, but it was also just like a level of confidence. Like you just feel a kind of inner strength that you might not feel, you won't feel when you are flaccid, as it were, right? Okay, so I'm going to move on from that, but I'm just saying I'm trying to make progress, and I hope I can someday report on something like progress. So today, first of all, let me introduce some of these problems here. So I've been doing this book every morning. Very pleasant to do in the morning. And the problems I'm going to show today are problems not necessarily that were beautiful, except for this one, but ones which which gave me some kind of grief. They could be beautiful too, but for whatever reason, I either found them hard, I got them completely wrong, or I got part of it wrong, like a variation of it wrong. And this is a beautiful puzzle, real game puzzle. And let me just say, before I show you what black did, is that, you know, when we talk about how to improve, one thing I'm really noticing is that what people say, what chess coaches say, are invariably the things that they did that they feel got them better. So, for example, right now I'm doing this thing with CoChess. You can check that out. Me and Kostya, also on ChessDojo. We're doing this thing on CoChess to, it's just like a teaching platform. And on this platform is a guy named Kalinichenko from the Ukraine. And his coach, Grabinsky, did, to my mind, the best, let's call it, puzzle book ever, which was Perfect Your Chess. By the way, I always put this on YouTube later, so anything I reference, like whether it's some book or whatever, I'll always put that in the YouTube description. Any case, so one cool thing I learned with Kalinichenko is that instead of it just being a book, right, he would go with a couple other guys, and Grabinsky would set up the positions, and you had to solve it in real time with like some competitors there. And then, if you got it wrong, he said, all right, now you have to go back and tell me why you got it wrong and what the right answer is. Where in the variations where was your mistake? And I think that, to me, that really appeals to me as a kind of training. And one of the biggest lacks of my own training is I did not have enough, let's call it team training, or even a coach. But that kind of thing where you're a bunch of guys and then you got to solve something beautiful. I think that's really good. The closest I got was we lived at the GM. I lived at the GM house with Josh Friedel and David Proust and Benoni Bott, a couple of other GMs, and we got together. We weren't as disciplined as it should have been, but there was a couple training sessions we had that were really good. Anyways, so Kalinichenko's talking to me and he's like, "Oh well, I want to do." I'm going to do calculation, right? So if you come study with me, it's going to all be about calculation, which is pretty weird in that, of course, that's how he came up. But it's also weird because when I imagine taking lessons from him, I'm like, dude, what are we going to do? Sit around and do puzzles? Like, you're going to tell me which puzzles to do? Like, what is it going to be, Whereas I really want, if I can imagine it, to be like me and Kostya and Proust, we go to the Ukraine, hang out at some hotel for $10 a night and do like, these puzzle sets hour after hour. That would be amazing. Anyways, as most of you know, my own spiel is all about going over your own games, and I think where that gets more interesting is, you're cultivating a sense of who you are and your own weaknesses. That is not to say it's necessarily better. That's one of the things I was reflecting on. It's not necessarily better that you do it that way, but I do think you become a more interesting chess player. And that's not to say the calculation is somehow wrong. In fact, I enjoy it a lot. But sometimes I'm suspicious of it, right? Like suspicious in the sense that you know, I enjoy it so much, and it's a little bit like a crossword puzzle. I'm terrible at crossword puzzles, but I'm just saying I know people like to do crossword puzzles, and they're very enjoyable. And in the same way, chess puzzles can be enjoyable as well. I got a lot of different answers. No one's got it yet. It's hard. It's very hard, this one. Yeah, beautiful too. So, why don't, actually, just for fun. Now, by the way, this guy Report, depending on how you want to pronounce his name, he has played some very interesting dynamic chess in the last decade. And one of the things to me about calculation that's interesting is it's not every player who gets this kind of position. And, the full art of calculation, is not of calculation, it's getting this position in the first place. And that's where it becomes, the skill of calculation becomes really important to finish the game. But when you look at like the games of Kasparov and stuff, I feel like although the combinations are the most beautiful, the build-up, was the thing that required the most art. Yeah, let's go back a little bit and see how it even started. Total madness. This is Kostya's kind of deal. And c5, okay, interesting. So this was the setup that Fischer used in the King's Indian. It actually, Kostya and I played a Blitz game in our training match where he adopted this kind of like sit on it thing, when you play c5 and just tell white he's never going to break through. And although I won that game, I was totally lost at some point because I couldn't find a way through. h5, f3, very tricky. And f4, white also, you can tell actually, so part of the deal of this game, I can tell already, is white goes a little bit loopy here with f4 because he thinks he can't ever crack black on the queen side. Now it's full. Now we really are dealing in calculation. Oh man, there we go. Now the madness has begun. f3. Oh no. f3 is already like not the first move to cross my mind. Now, one cool thing actually about f3 that we're going to get to in the game is that it opens up this diagonal. There it is. Snip. Snip. Bishop g5. I'm sure white could do other things, but this is the position that dude is aiming for. Rook f8. Does not even taking on c4. I'm almost certain that, well, okay, if we take on c4, the guy has bishop f4. So here, knight c4, knight b5, and there we have our game situation. Let's just say a couple obvious things. By the way, I'm really a fan of having a narrative of the position. That is to say there's some kind of story happening that, came from what happened before and what's going on right now, just in terms of the careers of the pieces. And that, I think, the idea of story and narrative is something that the people who are all about calculation don't like. They have a problem with that because they feel like that it gives you assumptions that maybe you shouldn't have. Okay, so the correct move, well, the best move, the stunner, is bishop f3. Really nice move. And the game actually kind of falls apart here from both sides. I'm sure it was heavy time pressure, but the main point to see is that if he goes here, I almost kind of, for whatever reason in my own mind, this is where I had trouble, and it was just like, in this position, I was like, oh, he comes back to hold f1. But no, it's in fact totally over. That variation not too long, but for whatever reason, the idea of the queen coming to the defense really threw me. So the other one, of course, is takes, and the problem is, in a position like this, even though I'm down a piece, he can't move this knight, or bishop d4 appears, and he has to watch out for this kind of business. And in the meantime, he can't really move. So beautiful, beautiful combination. Now, what I'm going to do is, someone says it's not objective. That's right. The narrative, okay, let me just actually respond to that. I think that might have been in jest, the claim like it's not objective to have a story. But I think it's, everybody has a story, whether they like it or not. And saying that you don't have a story is just hiding the fact that you do have a story from yourself. Like, imagine you ask somebody the question, why do you think, or do you think white has an advantage on the first move? And they might say, yeah, and you say, why? And they say, well, because the guy's got an extra tempo. And I say, thank you very much. That's the story of the position. You know, it doesn't, you don't have to go any further than that, but that's the story of the position right there. Okay, so here's an interesting game. I want to look a little bit even how it happened. GM Brian Smith, I've played several times, very dynamic and principled player. And this was a poison pawn, I believe. And really, this guy, every time I've played Brian Smith, it's been really violent. And this game is no exception. Oh my God, look at this mess. Look at this mess. So, oh my God, what a disaster. So what we can say already, for sure, is that both sides were in time pressure at this point. All right, white plays rook f1. As I was saying, this is a very fashionable idea that you should be repeating stuff. And like I was saying as well, the books I have done are this Russian endgame book that is impossible to get, so I can't even recommend it. But actually, all the books that I ever mention, I always link in the YouTube description when I post it on YouTube later. Anyways, I've got that. I did the Polgar Made in 2 book that you see over there. Done all those books several times. I've done the Perfect Your Chess book by Grabinski several times. And anyway, so that's what Kostya's on about when he's doing this ridiculous puzzle grind thing. And yeah, like I said, we have a debate in the dojo. Me and Bruce think it's a little bit ridiculous. But one thing that it does highlight for me, and this is why I called this show The Long and the Short of Calculation, is there's this idea in psychology, which makes a lot of sense to me, that there's really 2 kinds of thinking, a long thinking and a short thinking. And one thing that hit me, I think maybe it's an accidental empirical experiment, is that the last 2 Title Tuesdays, and these are the weeks in which I've been doing this Agard book, I did really bad. I did really badly, especially, at least in comparison to the earlier Title Tuesdays. And so the thing about it is, when you do problems like the ones I'm showing today, they're not going to help you in Blitz. In fact, I think they're going to hurt you, because they're so deep, and a lot of them are intuitive, that you can't translate that to a Blitz experience. So that's what I mean by long thinking. Short thinking is definitely the stuff that Kostya's doing, the stuff that you see in 5-10 seconds. And if you want to become a really good Blitz player, I guess that's what you got to do. You got to train your mind to see it and play it quickly. So it's like two different things. And so the experiment, just to repeat myself, is that by doing this book, where I'm really, doing problems that sometimes take me 15 to 30 minutes, I'm actually making my Blitz chess worse, which is fine with me. The Title Tuesday is more of a fun thing for me to do anyway, just, so I can have some competition while I'm waiting for real tournaments to come back, as I'm hoping they are. Okay, so I'm going to try to say a couple words about this one. I had the most horrible time in this position where, for whatever reason, I'm going to show you the brain trouble I had, is I saw Queen C2 within the first couple minutes, and then I thought forever, and here's the weirdest thing. I literally looked at this position forever, and total brain meltdown. Instead of the very obvious bishop d7, my mind was only playing king e6. Really hard to understand how I could miss that, but the miss is so elementary, and it, literally I'm spending 20 minutes there, that I know it happens to everybody, these misses, and I think that part of the training is to avoid the misses. And what I'm going to say is, by doing the training of the calculation, you're getting your mind ready to see deeper over the board and not make as many mistakes. A mistake like this, however elementary it is, it really will cost you probably the game. And so then if you go over it again and again, and I was like going over this king walk variation with king e6, queen f7 multiple times, at least for 5 minutes, because I was convinced that queen c2 had to be the right move, and missing bishop d7, that's it, the problem's over. And so eventually I go back and I'm like, well, I guess I play king e6, I guess. That was the move that was in fact played, and Lasnica won, but it's a very unclear position after king e6. Yeah, Mitch is saying, I'm telling all chess players not to get married. I'm telling you, it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. Mitch, by the way, is moving to a new house with his wife, and they've got 3 rooms, and I'm like, dude, you're going to have kids soon, so you better make your chess goals happen now, my friend. Because after you get the kids, it is all over. Completely over for you, buddy. So, I've got another question. Do I think Logozar's theory is correct? No, I don't. I think it's terrible. As I was saying, that's this puzzle grind thing that Kostya's doing. But I do want to plug, Kostya's got 2 videos out now on how to master Puzzle Rush and Puzzle Grind out on our ChessDojo site, so you can check that out. I'm happy to be wrong on this thing, but that's the way I feel about it. I also think, and here's an interesting aesthetic thing that's generational. For the older players like me and Kalinichenko, we're really focused on studying over the board. The younger people like Kostya, they're used to doing chess online in front of a computer. And to me, there's something not spiritual when I'm in front of the computer. I want the board and the pieces, and the whole experience of quiet. And I don't want the Twitter talking to me when I'm doing it and all the other stuff that's going on online. Okay, so I missed that one. Let's do another one. This is a very famous game, and I'm kind of interested to see how it started. But I think my answer probably was, let's call it technically correct, but it wasn't by definitely not the best move. So let's just first look at how this thing started. Lubo, of course, I guess many of you won't know, but he was a fantastic player back in the day, very creative, and already we have ourselves an interesting position. Oh yeah, this is beautiful stuff. He says, go ahead, you can play knight f2 if you want, buddy. Dang. Oh, yeah. That's real chess there, my friend. That's some real chess right there. So actually, let's just say the obvious. The combination we're about to see is beautiful. But that, what we just saw, the buildup of the attack, was definitely even more beautiful. So, uh, there we go. I'll probably be doing this book for the next couple weeks. If you have any questions about calculation, when we talk about some, I will. And I'm interested too in ways I might be wrong. One thing I want to say about the Agar book that I don't really get is, and this is actually another debate in the dojo. Kostya wants these puzzles to be like in chapters, like maybe you do a chapter on pins or skewers and that kind of thing. And this book is doing it in terms of like one chapter is called like combinational vision and candidate moves and that kind of thing. And honestly, to me, they're just puzzles, you know. And what's cool about them is that they're from recent GM games. Or this one's not so recent, but nevertheless, they're all from GM games that are mostly recent games. The thing about puzzles, which is interesting, that helped me think about the beauty of the Perfect Your Chess book, is that book's puzzles were truly like not just some interesting position that Agard saw, but they were like really deeply chosen. And what I mean by that is like, dude really thought about what was which were the best positions, and he had his students go through all these positions so he knew the human point of reference on it. A lot of these problems, for example, I'm looking at, I'm like, oh, that's a computer's answer, which is fine, but it's more interesting to see like how humans had approached the position, and also why I don't want some random computer position. I want something that actually happened in the game, and preferably also something like this where the guy actually found, the right move. Okay, so here we go. I'll show you this one. Knight d6, castles knight d6, snip, check to the miserable king. And here is where I got it wrong. I think I had queen a6 and bishop. I did have an answer that I thought was good, but let me just say that I missed this move that Lubo played, which is just fantastic. Look at this one. Bishop b5. Oh, man, that's a good one. That's a really good move, my friend. And then it's all over. You are threatening bishop a6. You are covering this delightful square. And then now if you take, my queen is connected to the bishop. It's a really beautiful pattern there. Okay, so that's an example of one I think actually would be interesting to see. I look back in my notes, to what extent my answer was right. But there was definitely an example of a position where I missed a key idea. I did not see bishop b5. With this one, I feel like also I might have gotten an answer that was technically correct, but I missed the, let's call it the correct way to play this position. So right, this is Wroblewski and Blagojevich. Blagojevich I played a couple times. Really interesting guy. Funny to think of it too, like both of these guys reached the high 2600s, and Wroblewski might have hit 2700 at one point, but they didn't crack the very top for whatever reason. Let's say the obvious, well, maybe we'll go back a little bit to see how this happened. But we're dealing with a typical knight takes g5 sacrifice here. One of the hardest things, I think, to calculate, they come up a lot, these knight g5 things, and you get this nice pin with the knight. And yeah, they can be very involved, and I'm going to imagine here that Blagojevich thought he was totally fine. Let's go back a little bit and see how this happened. Yeah, standard four knights business. And we can see the g5 thing coming from a mile away, right? There it is. And maybe, yeah, it's kind of hard for black too. There's like, white's not really threatening anything major, but if you don't play g5, it's a little bit hard to see exactly how you get out of your little rut there. So here we go. King h7. Now why king h7? Because he wants to have rook g8. Huh? It's kind of, this is a, so actually right away you can say that it's not, oh, I get it. If he goes to g7, the rook is going to swing. Right? So if king h7, rook e3, we can play rook g8 and maybe we live. Right. Okay. So he entices the queen forward. Queen g3, rook g8, and here's the business here. People are talking about calculation books. I think this book, for example, people say it's hard. I think the beauty of the Perfect Your Chess book, which is the one I would first say you do, is they're not all super hard. And if you just do, regardless of your level, if you just tone it back a little bit and do one a day, I think it's going to be fine. Totally fine. Okay, so let me show this one. Bishop f6. Obviously, people were thinking about that. They thought about that. And they thought about that. But then the thing that I missed was ef, check, and then e5, very nice move, which takes away that square, right? So we get then, and if you take, we're going to see what happens if you take. If king f5, I'm assuming g4 ends it. Very nice. So takes, and then rook e5, life's a bummer, right? And then you're going to lose the queen. Very nice continuation. I might go back and even turn the computer on because I did have what I thought, I remember here, I thought f4 was winning. So I'm just going to check f4. It still likes my, actually, yeah, it likes my life here. It likes my life. And right, I thought knight h5 was forced. And then I was going to check. And this is maybe not as good, but it's still winning. Yeah, still winning. Okay. Still, I'm going to say his way was better. So a lot of these problems, you have another way to win, but there's some cleaner way. And I think one of the things about chess puzzles that GMs are drawn to is the kind of puzzles in the Grabinski book. They are, for the most part, cold of these second answers. Like there's very few problems I can remember where something like this, where there was actually two ways to get it done. At least on the first move. Sometimes down the line, there's another way of getting it done. But yeah, you can't. For the GMs, it's hard. And I tell you where it just makes me lose my mind is on the puzzle rush when there's definitely an answer, a second answer, and I do that one. And then the thing tells me I'm wrong. It just makes me want to scream. I watched Kostya doing his business, and he never screams at the computer. And it just infuriates me when the computer does something weird like that. So anyways. All right. Let's go to the next one. And we got ourselves a raid here. All right. Mastro Velas. This one I had actually seen before, but I couldn't get it right. My answer was knight takes e2, and I still would like to believe that that move is winning. Maybe I'll just check knight e2. Oh, no, it says no. It does not say knight e2 is winning. Okay, so right, there's only one winning move here. Maybe we'll back it up a second. See how we got there. I love the Benoni. Absolutely love it. This is all very theoretical. Snip. And then, right, here we are. Arguably, this is a position that black might have known. I think this is, and that's how I knew it, actually, now that it's coming back to me. It was not a position that, like, I knew because it was a game. It was a position I knew because it's like a theoretical position. So, yeah, black to move here. Really, really elegant solution. And let me just say, I played the Benoni as a kid, and one of the things that confused me for sure was there were several games where black ends up crashing through on the king side. And it certainly can happen, like in this game, but it gave me a false understanding of what the Benoni was about. Famously, you can think about Fischer and the GH5 business against Spassky in 1972. And then the Levsakis games, there were several, in the 1980s, there were several games where he broke through on the king's side too. In any case, I didn't have someone telling me, bro, it's about the queen's side. It's about, I wish someone had just told me, it's like, oh, listen, it is about you crashing through on the queen's side before he murders you with space and then your king. First in the middle and then on your own king. So let me show you this. I don't think I would see it. Hoseput sees it, and that's bishop h3. Very anti-intuitive to me that it works. And I guess to me the main question is like, well, what if he takes and we come in, king g2, rook e2, and the problem for the dude is like, even if you sack the queen, the attack isn't over, and of course from the very beginning this knight has been a disaster. So bam, bishop h3, and it's over, I guess. I guess it's over. Maybe I shouldn't even say that. Let's just say for a computer it would be over. For a person, this is still, this is still, the fiesta is still going. And I'm sure the game lasted quite a while still, but I'm sure both sides made mistakes. In fact, let's just check this here with the computer. I bet black does make some mistakes just in terms of the computer. Right, like for example, the computer wants queen h4 now, which makes a lot of sense to me. You took the bishop with the intention of playing queen h4, so why are he's kind of like bailing out with his victory with bishop g2 right now. Okay, let's do another one. This one I'm going to put in the category of me just overlooking something basic, kind of like the Smith one at the very beginning. So a position where it seemed like it was easy, and then I allowed myself to convince myself that to say, some kind of dumb narrative like, oh, the problem's really easy, it's not that hard. So right, this is Ding playing a great combination. One thing that I've thought about a lot but was recently expressed again in words that I liked was, if you check out the Perpetual Chess podcast, I recommend it. I haven't listened to close to all of them, there's too many. But recently, GM Patrick Wolf was on there. And, the question, he's now doing finance, but of course he was an amazing player back in the day. And he was asked, I think it was a call-in question, how has chess benefited you in the financial world? And hilariously, he said, if you want to get good at basketball, you should play basketball. It's not like chess is going to necessarily help you do anything else. But where chess, he put it in a way that really I've said to myself for many years, but hadn't put it, at least in his words, and is a reason I think doing problems is especially good, is that in the rest of the world, or let's say in the rest of one's life out there in the world, there is loads of BS. Like the BS level is just off the hook. People convincing themselves of things that aren't true all the time. And they do it because they can't help themselves and because they want to see the world in a specific way. You see that in the both sides of the political spectrum, for example. One already has two different sets of facts, completely different facts, because they view the world in a certain way and continue to rationalize that viewpoint without getting punched in the face. And the beauty of chess, and to a certain extent chess positions, is you are going to get punched in the face if you get it wrong. So there's like this amazing purity about it. Anyways, when Wolf was talking and saying the great thing about chess is that there's this recursive quality. I would have never put it this way, but this recursive quality of, you putting something out there and then some element of truth is coming back to spank you if you get it wrong. Whereas the rest of the world, you're mostly putting BS out and mostly BS is coming back. That's not to say that there isn't truth out there, but it's never going to be, in my experience, as clean as this kind of experience. So what am I saying? In terms of chess, very easy to get sloppy, and then once you get sloppy, it's easy to lose a lot of one games. A lot of one games once you get sloppy. And so I was looking at the thing, and I looked at rook f7. That was my first candidate move. And then I was like, wait a second, rook 1 e5, game's easy. I'm going to play rook g5, game over. And then, I was convinced myself that I was right, even though I had a little tingling sensation that I wasn't. Well, what's the problem? Queen b6. Did I look at that? No, because I was like the queen's fixed to the f6 square. Very typical mistake. And like I said, one of the beauties of chess is that you can't cheat. If you cheat, you're going to get punished. Let me put it that way. Okay, so let's show the correct answer. Queen a7, and here's the right move here that's really nice to find. Rook e6, exclam. And you see this a lot with the queen getting bullied out of her defensive position. So if queen f4, we come back, queen c5, and the king is going to get mated. And if queen f7, it's a similar kind of deal. And unfortunately for black, he really doesn't have time to get the party started with the c3 pawn. So, one more. This one, hide it, Kraai, hide it. I almost showed some of the answer. This was a position. This one very beautiful. I did get this. I did get the key move. However, I want to say it took me way too long. So that's one of the things about calculation too, is it's not just right or wrong, unfortunately. It is how fast you do it. If you take forever to solve this problem, you're not going to do it in a real game. In fact, your capacity in a real game is going to be much, much less, because you aren't going to think of it necessarily as a chess problem. You're going to be thinking about positional factors and yada yada, but you're not going to say to yourself, oh, this is a chess problem and I have to calculate it out. And honestly, that's one of the let's call it things I think is misleading when the chess calculation people talk about that being the method of chess improvement. Misleading because in a real game you don't know that you have a chess problem in front of you. And at least in my experience, it's only by going over your own games that you develop a kind of taste for when the critical position is there, and recognizing that you have a critical position. Boy, that's the real art. Like I said, the key on a competitive level is to know that you have the critical position, and that is something that doing calculation is not going to help. The key on a practical level is to know that you have the critical position in front of you, and learning calculation puzzles is not going to teach you that. But what the calculation puzzles can do is just get you better, more precise, and quicker. By better, in a little ways, more honest about your answers, too, and quicker. And the quickness is huge because unless you know that there's something here, it's really hard to burn 30 or 40 minutes on the clock. And I'm guessing around 30 minutes is what I spent here. And I had to find, as Nepo does, I had to find like the key move. And the first move, let's just say, that pops to mind is knight f6. Knight f6 is the first move that's going to come to mind, but there's some things, you know, you're going to want to see about it. So then you start looking, if you don't see an answer, you start looking at other moves, like, oh, it would be cool to take the dark square bishop, for example, so knight d6 and rook f6. And then you say, well, maybe it's cool to play rook f6 in some fantastic way. And so it's like, I'll describe my own thought process here, is I spent loads of time until I found the key move, kind of like going back. And what I mean by that is I would like get stuck, I would see the position, and then I would go back to this one to look for other possible first moves. And one of the things that Agard and others, I think, correctly point out is the idea that was put forward ages ago by Kotov, Think Like a Grandmaster, is that you have this really disciplined like thought tree, and you establish the candidate moves, and then you go back. You never go back. You like do one variation, and then you sternly say, variation no good, and then you move on. And it's total BS because you need to explore them all at a kind of similar depth. And what's also true is you will find ideas in some lines that you can then, you were like, oh, I didn't see that in the other one, and then you can go back, you know, and you can figure it out that way. So it's a far more organic process. And because it's an organic process, that's why I feel like it's really misleading to write big books about calculation. Like, when you're doing calculation, you need to do yada yada. No, it's, you know, it's a very organic thing, just like playing chess is, where you can get good at it and you can see some positions and hopefully really learn to think about the positions. Hosebud says before, perhaps that's definitely a thought. Let me say that I looked at v4, but if we lose the knight on e4 right now, things aren't going to, we're not going to devastate black. Let's just put it that way. We could think about knight f6, king h8, and then at some point b4. Definitely something that was going through my mind. So let me show you the key idea. And by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube later, you know, you can pause and try to find it yourself. This particular game, I didn't plan it this way, but it's kind of fun to end on because Nepo will, at some point in the hopefully near future, have his big chance to win the candidates. Personally, I'm of course rooting for Fabi, but Nepo is in the lead and has to be considered the favorite just because of his point edge going into, let's call it, phase 2 of the candidates. And this tactical skill that he's about to show here, I think, is indicative of you know, the skills not only that he has, but like a lot of the top players. So, knight f6 forces king h8. Okay. And now you can consider queen f5, queen h5, bishop takes c5. I looked at them all. And the more moves that you have at your disposal, obviously, in a calculation exercise, it's worse for you. In a real game, you know, you are thankful for every possible move you've got. That's a key difference, right, between a calculation exercise and a real game. So queen h5 is correct. Okay, snip, snip. I saw that. I then realized that rook g8 was forced. I saw that. And then I said, okay, rook g7 is forced. Okay, so we are at move 4, 5 of this series, and right, it took me forever. I looked at g6 a long time here because I felt like that had to be correct, but then he just takes, and then I don't know what I got. I don't know what I got after that. So it took me forever, and right, if I didn't know it was a puzzle, I would have given up. The right move, though, is in fact instructive, and let's just say if there is a value to doing these calculation exercises, it's that you gain little ideas, little themes that you can use in your own games. So the correct idea, bam, bam. Not the first thing you would think of when you're back on move 21, and now we're on move 26. By the way, Kostya has this game in his book, and I'm going to go through it. We had a hilarious thing where we were talking about the H3 Najdorf, and I was criticizing it as newfangled, and Kostya was like, and I was like, back in the day, they wouldn't even think about this move. I mean, when Fischer played, yada yada, and and he's like, Kostya's like, oh man, well, in a real like deadpan voice, he wasn't even being mean about it. He's like, well, Fischer played it against Najdorf himself. Anyways, classic moments of the dojo. Let's blaze through it, and I'll show you the end. Yeah, well, it feels like it makes sense once you see this position, right? F6, exclam. Very nice. And like I said, the real skill is building the position up. ED, snip, knight e4, knight c5, and right. He's in difficulty. Let's just be honest about it. If you don't have knight c5, things are already pretty bad. And then it's just disposing of this knight c5 move, which is the trick. Okay, let's check it out. Knight f6, queen h5, snip. We're threatening rook h6. Snip. The fantastic g6. How did it end? And the king is toast. Oh, man. Very nice finish. And I think one of the dreams, too, about knowing how to calculate or feeling is actually, let me put it this way. The dream is the feeling of confidence in your own calculation, and the dream of finishing a game off in this kind of style where you aren't like Kraai, who's like gonna, if he wins a game, it's gonna be like a move 90 in hour 6 of a really long game, and then you can go back to your hotel room and relax, and life is just beautiful. So in the same way, or similar way to the way people learn openings with the idea of having a weapon in their hands, I think that's part of the dream of the people who espouse calculation. Again, I'm not opposed to calculation books, but for me, they're primarily fun, though, I'm sure they are not a hindrance to my own chess improvement. All right, so let's read one quote from Kostya, from our sponsors. The real argument is for 1800 plus who are already pretty decent with simple tactics. Should they work on deeper stuff or stick to themes? I think both. Right, so Kostya's he's into the themes. I don't get it. By the way, I'll talk about this a little bit next week. I don't really understand. All I see in this Agard book is like a bunch of puzzles, and they're kind of organized, but I don't get the organization of it. I've been working on it for a couple weeks now. I still don't get it. Maybe I'll figure it out by next week. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for being part of the show. I'm sorry that it was messed up a little bit with the streaming, but they tell me it was not me. It was in fact Twitch, which absolves me from all of my technical, logical grief. All right, bye-bye.